President doing right now to prep for this big night?
Well, the president has been very involved in drafting the State of the Union and making sure that obviously you're going to see him speaking directly from the heart. The president is going to be focusing on building a safe, strong, and proud America. He wants to address all Americans and talk about how we're going to be lifting up all Americans and ensuring that they have expanded opportunities, economic opportunities, also investing in our American workers. I mean, this is going to be a very strong and powerful message where he wants to be forward-looking, bipartisan, and calling Congress to take action on so much of the priorities that the president is focusing on. He's also going to take the opportunity to talk about his accomplishments. Obviously, last year was a very historic year in terms of passing the tax cut law and the benefits that we've already seen in our economy, from over 250 companies providing bonuses or increasing their wages for their employees, having companies saying they're going to bring back business to America. And as the president says, we're open for business. And so this is the renewed optimism that we have been looking for so long in America, where it benefits all Americans. And that's going to be that message of hope and strength that we'll see coming out tonight from the State of the Union.
We expect it to be a very big moment for this president, and you and other members of the president's team have said he plans to unify, particularly members of Congress there that are still so divided. How specifically can you tell us that the president plans to do that tonight?
Well, first of all, I want to say, one of the biggest components always in the State of the Union is the gallery of guests. And what the president's going to hone in on is about the everyday American hero and what they're giving back to their communities. And those are the people that we work for. We work for the forgotten men and women. And so I think it's a reminder to both Democrats and Republicans that this is not about politics or party. This is about the American agenda. And so the president is working for the American people. And what he's presenting in so many cases, and when you're talking about infrastructure and investing in our roads and bridges and in our workers, when you're talking about immigration reform, he is reaching across the aisle. He wants to work with the Democrats to get the results done. And at the same time, he's going to talk about the fact that it's important that because of what he's pushed forward in terms of his economic vision for America, that of deregulation and job creation, that we're seeing the benefits. And we want to make sure that we deliver that message to the American people.
And he'll be able to deliver that message, but not to some Democrats, Mercedes, who say they're just not going to show up. There's a lengthy list now, including Maxine Waters, a Democrat who says the president doesn't deserve her attention. Frederica Wilson, another rep, says that it would be an embarrassment for her to be seen there. John Lewis from Georgia, citing Trump's recent comments about Haiti and other African nations. Barbara Lee, I mean, we've got pictures up of these Democrats who are planning to boycott the president's first State of the Union address. What does the president think about that?
Well, we call that political theater. It's political stunts by these congressmen who obviously want to have a soundbite in the media, because what the president is focused on is about that, single mom in middle America, or that hard-working construction worker who is now going to get a pay check increase and be able to save for their child's education. I mean, this is about real stories. This is about talking about the progress we're making in America. This is about defending our homeland and national security, rebuilding America, rebuilding our military, which, as we know, should be very much of a bipartisan issue.
And you think they would at least want to show up, right? So I have to move on to a couple other things. I know it's a busy morning for you, but Andrew McCabe is out. That making huge news yesterday. And then we later saw a video of the DOJ's Rod Rosenstein and Christopher Wray from the FBI leaving the White House after the announcement of Andrew McCabe's departure from the FBI was made public. What were they doing at the White House?
Well, I'm not aware of that in particular, what happened in that meeting. What I can tell you is that the president was not involved in the decision-making process of McCabe. This was something that I would refer you to the FBI.
So the president, what was his reaction then when he did find out, if he was not involved in his removal from the FBI? What did he think when he found that out?
Well, again, the president has full confidence in his FBI director, Christopher Wray. He's a man of integrity. As we know, the president has been vocal and been concerned about political interference of some in the FBI who have made certain announcements and made certain suggestions. So again, there has been concern about the political interference. When it comes to McCabe, that obviously was a decision made by the FBI.
And Mercedes, lastly, the House committee last night had a debate and a vote. They decided to release and make public this very controversial memo. It now sits on the president's desk. Does he intend to make that memo public?
Well, the president's consulting with his national security team, with his legal team, to decide the next steps and the next course of action.
Do you know which way he's leaning on that?
Again, the president has been consulting with his team. He has 5 days to make the decision. As we know, the president wants transparency. He's been concerned with the abuses of FISA and what it has done in terms of infringing in the civil liberties of our law-abiding citizens. So again, the president has 5 days to make this decision.